Your Doritos bag is 20% smaller now, but you are still paying the same price for it. That little corner of your shopping cart hides a quiet, relentless robbery of your purchasing power. You probably noticed the crunch, but not the arithmetic, and that is exactly how this works. What happened next will shock you because this is not a single product trick. Companies across categories are quietly reducing sizes while keeping price tags intact, and you are the one making up the difference. Shrinkflation sounds like a clever word, and it is designed to be unnoticed by you. In plain terms, shrinkflation means the package gets smaller while the price label stays the same, or rises slowly. It is a method of passing higher costs on to consumers, without the ugly optics of a price spike. This invisible form of inflation works because most shoppers compare prices by the sticker and not by the weight or volume. You pick the cereal because the number on the tag looks familiar, not because you checked the grams per dollar that morning. Shrinkflation is not a recent invention and has roots that go back decades in consumer markets. Companies have long toyed with package sizes, bundling, and subtle formula changes when costs rise or margins need maintenance. The tactic becomes most visible during periods of broader inflation, when input prices such as ingredients, energy, or freight climb quickly. But here is where it gets interesting, because companies prefer shrinkflation to obvious price increases. A small reduction in grams looks less like a corporate decision to charge you more and more like normal packaging variants or redesign. Let us look at the most obvious victims of shrinkflation, beginning with snacks that once defined casual eating. Your chips, chocolate bars, and candy are old favorites used to anchor shopping baskets, and companies know you will likely pick the familiar brand, Doritos bags, Cadbury bars. And many popular chocolate brands have quietly reduced weight while keeping the price stable. You might not notice a 10 or 20% reduction in a single bag, but those small losses add up across a month of grocery trips. When multiplied across millions of consumers, the result is a massive, hidden transfer of value from households to corporate balance sheets. Toilet paper is another place where size quietly disappears from your life without drama. A roll can lose sheets or ply while the manufacturer markets it as the same product with improved design. You only discover the change when the roll runs out faster or the package lists fewer sheets, and you wonder when exactly that happened. This category is especially insidious because it touches basic dignity in daily routines. Fewer sheets per roll are not a novelty or a bad design choice. They are a deliberate adjustment that hides a price increase in plain sight. Beverages are part of the shrinking story as well, and you can find examples in sports drinks and bottled water. Gatorade and other brands have trimmed bottle sizes, altered bottle shapes, and changed labeling while keeping price points steady across many markets. That smaller bottle looks like a design refresh until you realize you are getting less hydration for the same amount of cash. What happened next will shock you if you track the math across a month of workouts, road trips, or school lunches. Shrunk bottles shorten your convenience and lengthen your grocery bills without a single dramatic price tag to blame. Breakfast cereals and snack boxes have also become victims of quiet downsizing that undermines your cereal bowl. Cereal boxes can be made thinner, with more air and less product, while packaging design distracts your attention. The front of the box still screams 18 ounces in marketing terms, even if the internal bag contains noticeably less content. You reach for the same brand and expect the same sitting, but you are getting a thinner portion every time. Over weeks and months, this changes consumption patterns, grocery planning, and the tiny rituals of daily life without anyone shouting about a price increase. The ubiquity of shrinkflation means this is not just about chips or candy, but about an economy-wide strategy. From household cleaners to pet food, medication packages to disposable razors, sizes shift while dollar amounts stay familiar. That familiarity is itself the weapon of a quiet wealth transfer from consumers to corporations. You might believe you are simply getting more selective or paying more for quality, but often you are paying the same or more for less. The cumulative effect changes the real price of living and erodes your standard of living without producing visible price spikes. So why do companies pick shrinkflation over shouting price increases from the rooftops? The reason is a mixture of psychology and strategy, where consumer perception trumps pure accounting. Firms understand that an obvious price hike can trigger brand switching, social media backlash, and easier comparison shopping. Shrinkflation exploits our attention limits, the way humans anchor to familiar numbers, and how we trust packaging more than measurement. The result is a tool that preserves market share while cushioning the blow to profit margins. Protecting profit margins is another blunt reason behind the practice because companies must answer to shareholders and quarterly expectations. When input costs rise, management has three obvious choices: raise prices, shrink product sizes, or accept narrower margins. You can guess which one is usually preferred when firms are rewarded for stable price perception and rising profitability. This creates incentives that reward subtlety rather than transparency. And you pay the price with every unnoticed handful of chips and every shorter roll. Over time, that hidden profit becomes visible in corporate earnings reports and stock valuations. You should also understand the psychology that makes shrinkflation effective, because it relies on human cognitive limits. People experience unit bias and status quo bias, meaning you inherently prefer the familiar size and expect continuity. Packaging redesigns and new marketing can mask quantity changes with flourish and a friendly new logo. That cognitive fog makes you less likely to compare grams per dollar at the shelf, and retailers are happy to let perception win, the choice architecture of supermarkets. With bright labels and promotional pricing, favors surface-level decisions rather than calculated value assessment. Retailers and brands often cooperate implicitly or explicitly in making shrinkflation less visible to you. Shelf placement, multi-pack design, and barcode management can hide subtle size tweaks from casual observation. New packaging can use air padding, resealable features, or clever photography to make the product feel just as generous as before. You are not always dealing with intentional deception, but the result is the same: a consumer who is less informed and more likely to accept less value. That information gap is the leverage point for widespread shrinkflation adoption. Now we move to the economics and measurement problem that makes this practice systemic and difficult to stop. Official inflation statistics measure price per product, not always price per unit of measure, which creates a blind spot. The Consumer Price Index and similar metrics rely on baskets and categories that sometimes miss the stealthy reduction in product quantity. Hedonic adjustments and sampling protocols can further complicate this because statisticians may treat package redesigns as quality changes rather than quantity changes. The net effect is an official inflation figure that can understate the real erosion in the goods you buy every week. The CPI problem is technical but crucial. Measuring prices without accounting for how much you get undermines accuracy. When the index records a price that seems stable, but the product contains less, the consumer price metric fails to capture the effective price increase. That methodological gap allows the official headline number to be lower than the lived experience at your kitchen table. But here is where it gets interesting, because the implications go beyond mere statistics. Understating inflation means policy, wages, and benefits can be calibrated to an incorrect baseline, amplifying long-term inequality. Independent researchers and journalists have started documenting shrinkflation through before and after comparisons in citizen science projects. Food bloggers, consumer reporters, and social media groups weigh and photograph products to show the math that official statistics miss. Those grassroots efforts reveal patterns across time and product categories that would otherwise remain anecdotal. You can see the evidence when someone posts a side-by-side weighing of snacks or a spreadsheet of sheet counts per toilet roll. These comparisons translate the abstract concept of shrinkflation into concrete losses that you can verify yourself. The consequence of underreported inflation is that you are poorer than the numbers say, and that matters politically and economically. If CPI understates real inflation, then wages, pensions, and indexed contracts lag behind true cost increases. That lag chips away at standards of living slowly but relentlessly, degrading household budgets without dramatic headlines. This invisible erosion is especially harmful to those on fixed incomes or tight budgets because they have fewer buffers against subtle value losses. The quiet nature of the theft makes organized political response harder and slower to emerge. Shrinkflation is effectively a stealthy wealth transfer where consumers fund corporate resilience and profit at the expense of real household purchasing power. As product sizes fall, corporate revenue per unit sold can stay the same or increase, boosting profit margins without visible price hikes. That dynamic is one reason corporate profits have at times hit record margins even amid wider inflationary periods. You are participating in a subtle redistribution when you accept smaller portions for the same price. The cumulative transfer is not trivial. It is a structural shift that advantages corporations over everyday consumers. This steady transfer creates broader distortions beyond balance sheets because it affects consumption decisions, savings, and trust in markets. Consumers who suspect manipulation may switch brands or delay purchases, affecting brand loyalty and retail patterns. Small changes in perceived value can cascade into different shopping habits that alter the competitive landscape. What happened next will shock you, because this behavior can entrench inequality and change market dynamics without regulatory intervention. The slow motion nature of the effect makes it important for both economists and everyday buyers to pay attention. You probably want practical steps to protect yourself from this invisible tax that companies impose. First, learn to compare unit prices rather than just sticker prices, because grams per dollar matters more than the headline price. Second, use digital tools and apps that track product sizes and prices over time, so you can spot pattern changes quickly. You can also support brands that are transparent about sizing and avoid those that routinely shrink products without clear communication. Small habitual changes in shopping behavior can reduce your exposure to stealth inflation over time. There are policy responses that could reduce shrinkflation if regulators chose to address it, and those changes would likely require better measurement and clearer labeling. Mandating unit pricing on fronts of packages, tightening disclosure requirements about weight changes, and improving official inflation measures to include quantity adjustments would make a difference. Governments could also require clearer comparative labels to make grams per dollar more salient on shelves. But policy takes time and political will, and companies have lobbyists who prefer voluntary compliance to legal mandates. That means informed consumers and watchdog journalism play a crucial role in pushing for change. Even if policy moves slowly, public pressure has historically changed corporate behavior when consumers insist on transparency. Social media campaigns, investigative journalism, and comparative shopping blogs can shame companies into reversing extreme shrinkflation moves. Brands sensitive to reputation risks sometimes respond quickly when the public notices and networks amplify the grievance. You can be part of that pressure by documenting changes, sharing evidence, and supporting accountability journalism. Collective awareness is the most effective immediate remedy against stealth reductions in value. The recent trend suggests companies will continue to experiment with packaging, portion sizes, and pricing because the incentives remain strong. During uncertain input cost environments, they will choose the path of least visible resistance and capitalize on your inattention. That means shrinkflation will likely be part of the economic landscape until measurement or regulation changes the payoff. But here's where it gets interesting for you personally. Understanding the pattern gives you agency and choice. Noticing the shrink, weighing the bags, and comparing unit prices can reclaim some of the power they try to hide. There is a deeper philosophical point beneath the arithmetic of grams and dollars, because shrinkflation also speaks to trust in markets and the value of attention. When companies can quietly change the deal without market friction, the social contract between buyer and seller frays. Your choice to look closely or look away becomes a political and moral act in an economy that rewards opacity. You have the power to demand better transparency, to vote with your wallet, and to insist on measurement that reflects real experience. The struggle over shrinkflation is a microcosm of bigger debates about power, attention, and accountability in modern capitalism. So what is the takeaway after all the examples, charts, and shopping tips laid out for you here? Shrinkflation is a quiet, systemic way corporations protect profits and transfer wealth to shareholders while leaving consumers to pay for rising costs. The official inflation numbers matter, but the everyday arithmetic of grams per dollar often tells a more accurate story for your household budget. If this gave you a new perspective on a piece of snack food or a toilet roll, you can start applying that vigilance today. A little attention at the shelf can reclaim a lot of value over the course of a year. The modern relevance of this story extends beyond groceries into how attention economy and corporate incentives shape daily life. Shrinkflation is an example of how small design choices interact with human psychology to produce large economic outcomes. You are experiencing a market that rewards stealth and punishes inattention, and that reality deserves scrutiny. Remember that transparency and measurement are political tools and consumer habits are powerful levers for change. If you want markets that reflect true value, you must insist on metrics and practices that measure what you actually receive for your money. If this video changed your view on everyday purchases, then you are already part of the solution by paying attention. Share the knowledge with friends and family who might not notice their cereal bowl is getting smaller. The more people learn to compare unit prices and question package redesigns, the less effective shrinkflation becomes as a strategy. If you want to stay informed about other hidden economic stories like this one, hit subscribe and join a community that cares about transparency and accountability. Small acts of awareness compound into big changes in how markets treat ordinary people. Before we sign off, consider a final, slightly unnerving thought about the future of everyday goods. As data, automation, and targeted marketing evolve, packaging strategies may become even more tuned to exploit attention gaps. That means the next frontier of shrinkflation could be personalized portions, dynamic packaging, and offers tailored to your buying habits. You should not assume the status quo will remain static, and your vigilance has never been more valuable. Awareness, documentation, and collective action are the best defenses against an economy that prizes invisibility. If this investigation gave you a clearer sense of the everyday economy, take one practical step this week to test what you learned. Check the unit price on 3 staples you buy and compare them to historical receipts or online listings. You might be surprised by what you uncover and how much value you can reclaim with a small habit change. If you like this deep dive into an invisible form of inflation, share it with someone who shops for the household. Collective awareness is how hidden practices become public problems that demand solutions. One final philosophical twist: shrinkflation reveals how economic power often operates through tiny, repeated choices rather than headline events. The erosion of value feels slow because it is deliberately incremental, and that slowness is what makes it effective. Understanding that pattern reveals a broader truth about where power accumulates in modern economies. If you carry that insight forward, you will read price tags differently and treat everyday purchases as sites of political and economic consequence. That is the kind of small habit that can shift large outcomes over time. That brings us to the end of this story about shrinkflation and the invisible theft of purchasing power you never signed up for. You have two options now. Keep buying on autopilot, or start scrutinizing sizes, unit prices, and packaging claims at the shelf. The first keeps the status quo intact, and the second helps build a market that values transparency. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe and join a conversation that matters. Your attention is currency, and noticing is a simple but powerful way to protect your wallet.